Right, we have lift off. Now, somebody saw this slide of Bishop Berkeley and Samuel Johnson, 18th century people coming out of church, and you can see that Samuel Johnson is kicking a stone. If you know the story, would you raise your hand? Very few people do. Okay, right. Let's take it from Boswell. Right. After we came out of the church, we stood talking for some time together of Bishop Berkeley's ingenious sophistry to prove the non-existence of matter, and that everything in the universe is merely ideal. I observed that though we are satisfied his doctrine is not true, it is impossible to refute it. I never shall forget the alacrity with which Johnson answered, striking his foot with mighty force against a large stone, till he rebounded from it. I refute it thus. Right? Now, those of you who know anything about Samuel Johnson will know that he was a very forthright kind of person, what shall I say, upstanding, down-sitting Englishman, and no nonsense, and all that kind of thing. And you have this Irish bishop, Bishop Berkeley, very, very clever guy, who is saying basically, matter is not the ultimate. That when things might seem to be solid, some of us were talking about this in the interval, as we know that something as solid as that table is just particles whizzing like that, and that it's solid enough to hold other things, but in fact at a certain level it is not solid. Now, Berkeley may have had some idea of that, but he came to his theory by more rational means. Right, this is Berkeley's idealism. Now, we talked about René Descartes and how, for him, if it wasn't mind, it was matter. The universe, everything, absolutely everything, is either stuff that is extended, got a length or a breadth or whatever, matter, or it isn't extended, and then in that case it's mind. Because I know some people have narrow minds, don't they? But you can't say how big or small mind is. So that's Descartes. The problem for Descartes, and the problem ever since with anybody who has that kind of way of thinking, is how do the two join up? You know, I say I want to raise my hand. Well, how come that my physical hand does what my non-physical mind says it ought to do? How does it happen? It's a mystery. Now, I'm not going to try and solve it today, though there are some pretty good 21st century ways around it. All right? But for Descartes, the problem was, how did mind and matter communicate? So, Berkeley says, if all we know of matter is what our senses tell us, right? In other words, the seat you're sitting on is more or less comfortable. The lights over there are more or less bright. There's a pretty awful data projector image up there. Your senses are telling you that, but that's all you know about the actual matter that's in the world. It's what your senses tell you. And you can be pretty darn sure that what your senses are telling you is not what the thing is really like. Say we look at, so we can all see the ceiling. We can all see the ceiling. Well, we can see the ceiling is white, sort of. Well, that's because of light that is reflected from that. And that light goes into our eye, and it goes through a lens, and that lens is a convex lens, so it turns the image upside down. Time it reaches our retina, that image is upside down on our retina. Our retina converts that to electrical impulses which go down the optic nerve to the brain, and the brain produces from that an image that enables us to walk around without knocking into too many things, and to find things we've lost, and to eat our dinner and all that kind of thing. But we aren't. When we say we see something, all we're seeing is reflected light off it. We aren't seeing the real thing. All right? So, Berkeley says, if all we know about matter is what our senses tell us, then we don't really know anything about matter. So why not forget about it? Why not just say, all that is significant is what we are perceiving in our minds, our ideas, in other words. That's what Berkeley was saying, not the way that Johnson put it. Right? Now in Latin, that is esse est percipi. To be is to be perceived. So, in other words, things exist because they are perceived, says Berkeley. Right? This sounds a little bit far-fetched, but if you think about it, if you don't see something, then it's not, unless you remember it, it's not there for you. If you've never seen something, it might be there, but it's not there for you. So to be is to be perceived, says Berkeley. Now, you may know the two famous limericks. If you know the famous limericks, would you raise your hand? Okay, it goes like this.
That famous, is it?
No, I say famous. It's only if you've done Berkeley. All right. So the first limerick goes like this. There was a young man who said, God, I find it exceedingly odd, the fact that this tree continues to be when there's no one about in the quad. Right? So a tree, to be, is to be perceived. If nobody's looking at this tree, it doesn't exist. Suppose says this young man in his limerick. However, there is a reply. Dear sir, your astonishment's odd. I am always about in the quad, which is why this tree will continue to be observed by yours faithfully, God. All right? So Berkeley says, but God observes everything. And that's why it stays in existence. Right? Now, that might sound a little bit too way out and spiritual, but there are reasons for taking that a little bit seriously, which we'll come to in a little while. Depends on what you mean by God. Right? If it's old guy with long beard and that kind of thing, forget it, maybe. But if you mean something like, say, Paul Tillich would say, the ground of our being, or ultimate reality, maybe there's some mileage in that. But anyway, this is Johnson's refutation, is to kick the stone and say, I refute it thus. Now, if only you could see these wonderful diagrams up there. This is the collapse of the wave function. All right? Now, observation and perception in terms of quantum mechanics goes like this. If we're going to see something that's out there, by the time whatever is out there has gone through the collapse, because observation collapses the wave function, it is no longer the way it was. So we, just by looking at something, not God, you or me, it would seem, or a scientist in a laboratory, just by looking at something, causes it to be something else, causes it to take on a particular shape. Right? It is no longer as new. Then the things are processed by the senses and the mind, and that's taken more time, so you cannot see what's out there. But by observing it, you change it into something that you can sort of get a handle on. Now that's, I don't understand it, but that is what we're being told. Sorry, yes.
Would it change if you hadn't observed?
That's a very good question. Maybe somebody else has observed it, but presumably not. But you've no way of knowing, have you? This is the crazy thing, isn't it?
And my question was,
yes.
If many people look at the same thing, so it has to change many times according to what each one sees, or how it works. Normally not one person sees
right.
one.
Now that's a very interesting question.
Many.
That is a very, very interesting question. And I can't give you a scientific answer, but I can give you a spiritual answer. All right? That when you get a lot of people who are focusing on a particular thing, then, if you like, things change much more readily. Now, in the reading list, I will give you details of a book called The Divine Matrix. And one of the features in that is I don't want to call it a theory. Let's call it a theory, but it's got a certain amount to back it up. That if, in order to change the atmosphere or the situation in a certain area, let's say you've got an area with there's a lot of knife crime. If you have, and there's good research on this, and you can read it in the book anyway, and you get 1% of the population desiring that change, then that is enough to bring about a noticeable change. Now, I didn't expect to go there.
For meditation.
That's right, exactly. I didn't expect to go there today, but thank you so much. Can I ask your name?
Ernestina.
Ernestina, thank you so much, Ernestina, for saying that. But that's a very good point. I will think about it from a philosophical point of view, but that's my immediate thought. My immediate response is a spiritual one. All right.
Coming back to the tree, sorry.
Yes.
I mean, surely the maths is still constant.
Yes.
The dimensions don't change. You measure the tree. Whoever sees it,
Yes.
those measurements stay the same.
Oh yes, but that's at a certain level, right? That's at the five senses level, the big level.
Yeah.
Get down to the lower level. Ooh, that's where you get the collapse of the wave function. But the tree is going to be billions of wave functions making it up.
That's just the quantum theory is called the measurement.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Stephen. I'm indebted to you for that. Right. Here we go. So to be is to be observed. On the left-hand side, you have the wave function. On the right-hand side, you can see what is there. Got the sun, a tree, and so on. So the universe, or the world, or the five senses world, is something that we, by perceiving it, this is according to quantum mechanics, we have a part in bringing it into being. All right? Berkeley. Now, I said that Berkeley's taken seriously. When I was at university, this guy, Karl Popper, on the right, you can see him nicely, he was the great guy. It was the 60s, the end of the last death throes of logical positivism, which is a very sort of rigid and narrow kind of philosophy that tried very hard in the 30s, 40s and 50s, but really was on a hiding to nothing because there was so much it had to leave out in order to be neat and tidy. And Popper was a guy who had a much more broad view and was clever enough to be taken seriously. And he wrote a brilliant paper on Berkeley. And he calls it a note on Berkeley as precursor of Mach, that's Ernst Mach, and Einstein. And it's basically to do with observation collapsing the wave function and of how observation it plays a crucial role within our understanding of quantum mechanics. So Berkeley from the 18th century gets taken seriously again. And well, if you're able to read it, the book is that one. I haven't got it, I gave it away as part of slimming down my library. It's called Conjectures and Refutations by Karl Popper. That'll be on the reading list. It's a lovely book. You know, a series of essays, beautifully written, far better than mine. And and that essay is there, and it is easy to understand. Right, so I commend that to you. Right, this is quantum mechanics refuting Johnson. Okay? Kick the stone, Sam Johnson. Break your bones. But cloudy is the stuff of stones. All right? That basically what we see as solid matter is in fact just lots and lots of particles whizzing round. And those particles are based in the wave function. They're very, 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 very small. So Johnson's foot, kicks the stone. But in theory, Johnson's foot could go right through the stone. Yes, please.
Your screen is reflecting this. The purple bit is the wave side, and then it collapses into the one.
Thank you. Right, thank you. Right. This is going in the bin afterwards, I tell you. Right, finally, we've, about 25 minutes left, and I'd like there to be some time for some discussion on this. All right, this is Plotinus. It's all Greek to me. We'll only do the English. Now, Plotinus was writing in the first couple of centuries of our era, and he'll be on your reading list as well. And I think there's some very remarkable insights in Plotinus. This is one that I've been pondering for about the past 6 years, and I'm still on with it. I think, therefore, that those ancient sages who sought to secure the presence of divine beings by the erection of shrines and statues showed insight into the nature of the all. By all, you could say God or the universe or the way things are, but that's the word that Plotinus uses, is the all. Its presence will be secured all the more readily when an appropriate receptacle is elaborated, a place especially capable of receiving some portion or phase of it, something reproducing it or representing it, and serving like a mirror to catch an image of it. There's a lot to take in one sense, but if you like to think of some sacred space or sacred building that you're aware of, then Plotinus is reflecting upon that particular kind of building. Why did people put it up? Why was it made that way? It was made with a view to making visible, perhaps to amplifying or to replicating a spiritual experience. Right? So that I'd like us to explore in a more leisurely way in the last section of today. So here we have a fine Greek temple, or is it a Roman temple? I can't tell you where it is. I'm not that good on architecture. But that's the way that in the ancient world, Greeks and Romans felt that they should build their temples. So what would be the features of that strike you, that would be perhaps able to capture something spiritual? Symmetry, particularly, yes. Right. Symmetry, order, big space.
Iteration.
Sorry? Repetition, yeah. Okay, yeah. So they're built in a particular way in order to enable people to recapture perhaps spiritual insights. And if we think back over our lives, probably everyone in this room would say, well, I think I had a spiritual experience in this place or at that time, and so on. But we aren't necessarily having an intense spiritual experience all the time, because otherwise we would be in a bit of an overload. But if we see that spiritual experience as being significant, then we want to be reminded of it. We want to have it informing our life. If we think it's something that's really shown us something really important, we don't want to lose track of that. So your temple enables you to do that. And I draw your attention to the what's written at the top. A place especially capable of receiving some portion or phase of the all. So, in other words, Plotinus is saying this isn't going to be taking on board everything to do with the all, or God, or the transcendent, or whatever you're going to call it, but just some portion of it. But as we've already established, a hologram could be a model whereby if you have just a little bit of something, then in a sense you've got all of it. So just having a little bit doesn't mean you haven't got access to all of it. This is a place that is very important to me. I'm sorry the picture is so dreadful, but this is Tregesil East. It's a stone circle. Is there anybody who would say that stone circles are particularly significant for them? You're waving a hand. Do you want to say why?
Because they've attracted people over the centuries and they have got a very, very strong vibe and just did used to, when you go around and look at it and sit on those things, we felt important.
Right. Yeah. Now, there's another thing will be on the reading list is from the French philosopher of the 20th century, Emmanuel Levinas, on the enchantment of sights. Now, he writes about this very, very well, about how people are drawn, even people who are described as atheists or not particularly spiritual or anything like that, they are nonetheless drawn to these ancient sites. So it seems like Plotinus was onto something that, even if it means tramping up a very rough lane or through mud and all that kind of thing, people will make the effort to go to places like this. Anybody want to offer anything about the shape of that ancient monument that might be relevant? Yes? The circle. Daphne, do you want to say a bit more about the circle?
It's no gaps in it, and it's complete movement of energy.
Yeah, right. So a circle, wholeness, all embracing, that kind of thing. Yes, 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 yes. Right. Yes, yes, yes.
I think the idea is you could tell what the sunlight said in
Yes,
summer's day.
yes. Yes, yes, indeed. That would help you, but also there's the point that they are aligned to celestial objects, so that there is a link, if you like, as above, so below. That they're linked to the big picture and that kind of thing. So there's a very, very definite message that is given by these. Now I have to say something a little bit sort of deflating here, because I know Tregersfield East very well. And I know that the cattle round there use those stones as rubbing stones and frequently knock them over. Also, so that that circle, there used to be 3 circles. In the 18th century, we got all the documents about it. It has been put up for the tourists, that one. a lot of stuff has been re-erected. And some people have done all manner of calculations and proved all manner of things, only to discover that the farmer moved it. Yeah, anyway.
Sorry? Notre Dame will be re-erected.
Oh, right. Thank you so much for mentioning that. Oh, my. It hadn't occurred to me to link this.
I wanted to say, when you had the screen up earlier with all the words about the spiritual place or something, and that's one of the features that's coming out about the Notre Dame.
Yes. Oh my, isn't it bringing out spirituality from people, which is what we can judge from the news reports, that it's uniting the French people, it's drawing out a spirituality that maybe they would have kept under wraps. Yeah. Oh my, yes. Tragic, but so timely.
It's interesting that in Greece and Roman times, they had rectangular. They never had round.
That's interesting, isn't it? Yes, that might be their love of order, and that their kind of beliefs were to do with order rather than necessarily linking with the cosmos. I don't know. I just chuck you that. That's a very interesting point you make there.
Yes, the Greeks are very good mathematicians.
Right. Yes. Right. Indeed. Yes. Yes.
They're actually amazing.
Yeah. So maths is spiritual with Pythagoras, for example.
Yes.
That the importance of number. Yeah. Right. Excellent. Yes.
And the concept of circularity and infinity, I think.
Right. Okay. Yes, indeed. Thank you. Okay. We're going places, aren't we, here? Now, this is perhaps a little bit less exalted in some ways, but this is leading to my conclusion on philosophy of spirit. that is something especially capable of receiving some portion or phase of the all. Let's go to the top right-hand one. That is Donald Trump. All right? What is happening?
People trying to rub him out.
Well, they might be in a sort of spiritual kind of way, but this is people praying for Donald Trump. All right? We won't get political, we won't get too spiritual on this, but nonetheless, there you have a gathering of people. They're laying their hands on him, and they are praying for this powerful man. One can imagine what they might be praying. But yeah, it is nonetheless a gathering that is capable of receiving some portion of the all. That the way in which they are gathered, this is just people, not a building, right? And so I offer you that one. What do we got?
Makes me think about what Paul say about Trump, and I'm certainly not a Trump fan. There are a lot of people in America that are hungry, don't have jobs, don't have houses, don't have even basic health care. So, he's not, you can see why they would want something to change this
Yes, indeed. Oh, yes, yeah. Yeah. Now, the other pictures, I'm afraid, are not coming over very well. The left-hand one is Einstein and a Buddha and a backdrop of a nebula. But these are sort of pictures of attitudes, ways in which people, as opposed to just a building or a set of stones, can be set up to receive some portion or phase of the all. Sorry?
They all are just point of reference.
Yes.
Building.
Yes.
What is the spiritual experience?
Yes. And they will gather people in them. That there's just, though you could say just the building sometimes can be enough. Back to Teilhard de Chardin, we are not human beings having a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. And then the quote from Plotinus again, an appropriate receptacle, especially capable of receiving some portion or phase of the all, something reproducing it or representing it, and serving like a mirror to catch an image of it. So with our five senses, with our human life, we cannot see the whole of the universe. Even if we believe in God, we know that we cannot know all of God. But that there are places, there are attitudes of mind, there are gatherings of people that seem to enable a receiving, a mirroring, a reproducing of that kind of understanding. And with that, I move to my final slide. If you can see it, I'd like you to ponder it a little bit. That's the line drawings that went with Voyager out on the gold plate, out into deep space of a man and a woman. And that's meant to be a nebula on the right-hand side. Right, now does anybody have any comments on that slide?
Looks like a body.
The nebula looks like a body. That is very true.
Well, like Paul saw.
Yeah, that is very true. Yes.
Just look at the face of Jesus.
yes. Yeah, but okay. Back to seriosity. I'm rather proud of this slide. All right, as a culmination of what we've been trying to communicate today. So please let's try and get it. Any comments on it?
Is it the Horse Nebula?
I don't know, but it could be any nebula. What about the guys on the left? And what about what's written at the top, an appropriate receptacle?
Presumably they can be made up of, if they're made from stones, it could be the nebula.
Yeah, could be coming from. What I'm going to say is that in this room we have 20 or 30 appropriate receptacles for what Plotinus calls the all. if I wanted to communicate anything this afternoon, it would be that in terms of spirit, that we are supremely placed to be a receptacle for spirit. That this is, here we are in the universe, or as I call it, universe, because there might be more than one. It's the one that we know. Here we are in universe. Science tells us that everything is interconnected, including us. Right? And we have consciousness, we have experiences of many, many kinds, and some of them very, very deep, and some of them that lead into understanding of the way the world is. David Bohm, for example, would say he gave as much importance to his meditation as to his mathematics, in being one of the leading particle physicists of the 20th century. So I offer it to you that we are an appropriate receptacle. Paul?
How do you feel about this new black hole then? How do you sort of sum that up, or you've got a personal comment to make?
A personal comment? Well, it isn't really a photo, is it? It's a computer-generated image. I suppose that there's going to be black holes, and it's part of the way the universe has to be. It would seem. I'll give you a spiritual experience. I'm walking in the Alps. I'm walking across a boulder field. I've gone deliberately to have some wilderness time and to think and so on. I felt when I was teaching and lecturing more full-time than I am now, I really needed to do that. And I'm walking across this boulder field. I'm thinking, why do we need so many stones? Right? And an inner voice, said to me, so you could be here. Right? Now you may say that's just the altitude or whatever. But universe, including black holes, I believe is there so that we can be here. And that's a bit of a privilege, isn't it? How are we doing for time? Oh, we've got 5 minutes. That's brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. There's one more thing I'm going to say, but yes, please.
What would you say about spirituality in animals?
Right. My. That's a good one, isn't it? How far does it go? I mean, animals seem to pick up things, don't they? That we aren't able to, not just dog whistles, right? But to quote Jesus, at the end of Mark's Gospel, Jesus is quoted as saying, preach the good news to all the creation, right? Okay? Preach the glad message of the glory of the happy God. That's another way of saying good news, right? To all creation. Any more comments?
I would add to that, I think it is, as you say, it is all creation. That includes trees, flowers.
Yes. And to certain St. Francis did that kind of thing, if you remember. And some people thought he was a bit wacky, but a lot of people think that St. Francis was a guy who was onto some really important stuff.
Preaching be implicit, that, in the way that we communicate.
Are you quoting Francis there when he says...
Question, really.
Yeah, well, it was Francis, isn't it, when he says, preach the good news everywhere and sometimes use words. Right? Yeah, of course. Yeah, of course.
Just making eye contact with an
So,
animal.
just one, please, yes.
Making eye contact with an animal.
Right, okay, yes, indeed. Right, yes, indeed. Yeah, somebody else was going to say something. Yes, back there, sorry.
Climate change things that are going on in London today, and how important it is that we look after this planet. We might be looking out there at the stars and things and seeing that we're quite so special, and we have to sort of maybe enlighten our sort of consciousness about how important all these things, these insects, and the trees, or the animals, and the whole ecosystem is important to us.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, yes, please.
We're not important to them, we get along with the houses anyway.
Yeah, but come on, much is expected of those two, much is given. Yeah, yeah. I think this is probably a time to really wind down a little bit. But for me, as a Christian, the words of St. Paul, where he says, "Your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit," is a very, very precious and important, for me, way of understanding life. That we are here, we're given bodies, minds, and all this kind of thing. We're given relationships, we're given nature, and part of that is that we will embody the spirit that is behind the hold on lot. So, thank you for your comments, thank you for your attention. I'm awfully sorry about this data projector, but if you put down the stuff if you put down your stuff on the pad, then provided you've written neatly, you will get a whole lot clearer stuff on this. You'll get a really good reading list, and you'll get a book sort of in draft form. Some bits are better written than others. Please, oh yes, please do, please do, and that will contain, I think, a lot of interesting ideas. So, well, enjoy the rest of today, and I hope that this has, what should I say, encouraged you in celebrating and recognising your spiritual dimension.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, David. That's very enlightening. I'm sorry about the purple.
I know. Look, at the risk of embarrassing Genevieve, I'm going to say I talk to lots of people about this area, and I call it the wild frontier of education. Because there's so much that is done here for lifelong education by different people, and Genevieve is one of them. So I'm going to ask you to give her a round of applause.
Right, okay, before you go, we've got one last song. This is Linda's favourite. She said, oh, cool, not that